to the channel that knows nothing. I'm Jam and let's get to it. So today we are diving on into the Pastry Book Tag, which just sounds delicious, so let's go. Question number 1 in this tag is croissant, and that is name a book that everyone else loves and you love too. And I decided to go with The Hunger Games because I feel like it's recently becoming a thing again. Like, people are getting back into The Hunger Games. I never left. Just pointing that out. I always loved it. I was always here. I will put my flag down as I love The Hunger Games first. I mean, I didn't, but I definitely feel like I was one of the first people in my friend group to read it, and I was just like so happy at the time. I thought it was an amazing book. I still do. I still love the series. I love the movies, and I love that we're getting a kind of prequel to it too, which I also do really enjoy. So, and I would highly recommend it too. I think some people are just like, oh, it's not as good. It's like, it's definitely not as good as the trilogy, but standalone is kind of really interesting. And you know, you're never gonna like Snow. Like, you're just not gonna like him. And like, during the entire thing, he wasn't even really my favorite character. And when bad things happened to him, I was kind of like, it was interesting. Like, all the other characters were really interesting, and he was too, but I just feel like you're never gonna like the dude. He evil. There's nothing to like. Number 2 in this tag is macaroon, and that is name a book that was hard to get through but was worth it in the end, and I'm gonna pick Gideon the Ninth for this one. I think what got me through it in the end was just Gideon being a dick and just so sarcastic and funny, and that was like worth it to me in the end. It was kind of fucking devastating though. I don't know if I want to keep going with the series with what happened. I don't want to say it, but also the fact that I've said devastating may give away why I don't want to read the next books. I feel like it is a lot. I ended up reading the audio book of it. Does that count as reading? I mean, I'm counting it. And so it was easier to kind of digest it that way, because reading it feels like a lot. So I understand why a few people give up on it, especially in the beginning. It gets a lot better, but it does take its time. Number 3 in this tag is Vullivent. I think I'm saying it right. I hope to God I am. But that is name a book that you thought was excellent but ended up falling flat. And I've got to go with A Touch of Darkness on this one, because, it was an interesting read, I must say. It was just, I went into it expecting a Hades and Persephone love story, which is kind of what I got. I mean, like, not kind of, it is what I got. But the only thing that I had to compare it with was Lore Olympus, which, you know, we all know that is an amazing series, but also it is a slow burn, and A Touch of Darkness is the complete opposite. I would argue. I just feel like it got very lusty and sex scene-y really quickly, which I'm not complaining about, but I also am, because I have Lore Olympus as a touch point for this. It's just like, ooh, this could be a really good scene in A Touch of Darkness, but the fact that they've already had sex ruins it, because I don't know, it just does, because I feel like it would just be all the more like slow burny. Like, I feel like that's what their relationship is. In my mind, that's what Hades and Persephone's relationship is. It's just an entire slow burn, and then he kind of like wins her in the end. But that was not the case with Touch of Darkness. There is a couple more books after it, and I will be interested to see how it goes. But yeah, there was just a lot of sex scenes in it, and like, it sounds like I'm a prude, and I'm not really, but it just felt like a lot compared to some other books I've read where it just feels like appropriate. Like, I feel like she's standing across the room from him and she just gets all like, ooh, and I'm like, I feel like a lot of women aren't really like that, but I don't know. I'm only one woman, and I'm just speaking from my experience with the book. Number 4 in this tag is Pain au Chocolat. I feel like I just butchered that. But that is name a book that you thought was going to be one thing and turned out to be another, and I have picked This Is How You Lose the Time War, because my god, it was not what I expected at all. I'm not sure what I thought it was going to be going into it, but I really loved it. It felt really poetic, and I didn't always know what was going on, but I feel like that was like the purpose of it. It's just like that they were at war and they were on different sides of things, and they sort of had a very unique way of like communicating, and I just thought it was really like wholesome in the end, and I loved every minute of it. Mwah! Beautiful. Number 5 in this tag is peripheral, and that is name a book or series that doesn't get enough attention, and I have decided to pick the Shadow Game trilogy for this one because I feel like not enough people know that it exists, and it's really good, and it's very unique, and it's kind of different, but it does remind me of Six of Crows in a way, in the sort of like sneaking around a sort of dangerous city kind of vibe, doing things that they shouldn't be doing, but also being badasses at the same time. Like, it's that sort of like vibe to it, and I really enjoyed it. I thought the characters were like different, and it was like a breath of fresh air because they weren't really like anything I'd seen or read before. They weren't like the Crows. Like, it's got the vibe of that sort of books, but it's not the same. They're like completely different characters. Like, it's just sort of refreshing and nice, and I liked it. The second one was my favorite. It was by far the most shocking one that I had read. The others, first one was like okay, because it was just a bit of a taster into the world. Second one, fantastic. Third one was a bit of a letdown, but I'm gonna let it slide because the second one was so good. Number 6 in this tag is Croquembouche, and that is name a book or series that is very complex. And I've picked Rise of the Dragon, or House of the Dragon, or Blood and Fire, or anything Game of Thronesy. I mean, it's not really I'm not really talking Game of Thrones. I'm talking more of the Targaryen side of things. Like, Game of Thrones it's complex, but I feel like it's mostly understandable, whereas it's just like, we're talking about the history of just one house. There is an entire book on it. Like, that's just a bit ridiculous. All for one house. He could do the same for the other houses, but no one would care. People like the Targaryens, as fucked up as they are. But that's why I'm going with this is the most complex thing I've literally ever read. I mean, I have not read this. I've read some of it because it's illustrated, and I'm like, I want to look at the pretty pictures and try to understand the history of this, because I don't. Number 7 in this tag is a Napoleon. I feel like a Neapolitan. I feel like I'm saying this all wrong. And that is name a movie or TV show that is based off a book that you like better than the book. And I feel like with these ones, I feel like I have said them before, but I will say them again because I will stand by them being great movies, is Maze Runner and Ender's Game. Like, I feel like they took all the sort of science fiction-y, like way over the top science fiction-y stuff out of what was in the books, and brought the sort of like main central story to the movies. Which for Maze Runner, I'm not sure if anybody has read those books. I remember them being great when I was young, and I came back to them like a few years ago, and I was like, ooh, this is not as good as I remember it being. And this is actually way too complicated for my liking, and I love the movies. I don't know why. I think it's the casting. I think it's the, environments that we go through in the movies, but in the books I'd never been so confused as to why all these strange things were happening. And then with Ender's Game, I think it's like fairly similar. The same sort of vibe. Oh, they're just better as movies. As books, it's just like, huh? What? Number 8 in this tag is an empanada, and that is name a book that was bittersweet, and I have picked Malice for this one. It was fantastic. I had so much fun listening to that book. It was amazing. But it is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, and you just know the entire time what is going to happen. I mean, no, you don't know. You hope that what you know isn't going to happen. Like, what the movie isn't going to be what this book is about. But, that's why it's bittersweet, because it ends up coming to pass, which is a little bit upsetting because it is an LGBT book. Like, it's a female and female relationship, Malice, and Sleeping Beauty end up being together, but then also like terrible things happen. It's just a lot, but then also great. And there's a sequel that I have not read yet, and I'm scared to read because I don't want a sad ending here. I want a happy one. I want a happy ending. Happy endings only. Number 9 in this tag is Koyube, and that is name a book or series that takes place in a country that is not your home country, which I find kind of funny because I feel like there is not a lot of books out there that are based in Australia, and yet, unless it is an Australian author writing about Australia. Like I just from personal experience, a lot of mainstream sort of like young adult and fantasy obviously is my main thing, but that's not going to be taking place in any country that anyone knows. But I feel like a lot of what I do read that is not fantasy or science fiction is contemporary, and it's young adult, and it does not take place in Australia. So literally anything that I read probably is not in Australia. That's why when I do read a book that is set in Australia, I get very excited because I do not always come across it, especially in the young adult section that is not fantasy or sci-fi. However, I have not picked a book yet, but I have decided to pick Youngblood because I feel like that is kind of in that fantasy genre, but then also takes place in America, and that is not Australia, and is kind of like one of the only books that I've read recently that hasn't been like a sort of fantasy that does take place in the world and not a fictional land. Number 10, which is the last question in this pastry tag, is Pedishu, and that is name a food from a book that you would love to eat. And I'm gonna go with anything and everything that Nina talks about in the whole entirety of the Grishaverse. Whatever she is eating, I will eat it too. Obviously not like share it with her, because I don't think either one of us would be good sharers when it comes to food. I would just end up eating the entire thing. She'd probably be really mad, and vice versa. So we would get 2, and then we would sit there and talk about the food, and it would be really fun for both of us, I think, because I love food, especially when it comes to waffles and pancakes, and I feel like she talks about them all the time, and it just makes me want a pancake. Or just, oh, mwah. That is literally half my brain capacity, is just thinking about things from Max Brenner. It's just, it's not good, but also like, oh, pancakes. I could really go some pancakes. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today. Please like, subscribe, because that is always nice, and I will see you next time.